Hello, dear ninth graders. Our objective for this session is to verify experimentally the presence of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids as organic foods. But this table, as you can see, summarizes the organic foods with all the tests and results that you will recognize a few seconds later. You can pause at it later after watching the video to review it, but now you are going to watch two videos that show three types of tests. Iodine test for starch and carbohydrates, Burette test, which includes the copper sulfate and sodium hydroxide mixture. Please guys here notice that this mixture of copper sulfate and sodium hydroxide is called the Burette test, which is tests protein, okay? And finally, the lipid test. So let's see together the identification test of these three foods.
Test for proteins and fat in food. Objective: to test for the presence of proteins and fat in food. Proteins in our food help us to grow and repair our tissues. Eggs, meat, milk, cheese, pulses such as beans, and ground nuts are all good sources of proteins that can be found in our regular diet. When reacting with an alkaline solution of copper sulfate, proteins produce a violet color. Let's use this test to check for the presence of proteins in milk. Begin by pouring 4 milliliters of milk into a test tube. Next, add a few drops of dilute sodium hydroxide solution. Finally, add 3 drops of copper sulfate solution. Gently shake the test tube so that the 3 liquids are mixed well. As you begin shaking the test tube, you'll notice the solution turning violet, confirming the presence of protein in milk. We can test plain water for proteins. Pour 4 milliliters of water in a test tube and add a few drops of dilute sodium hydroxide solution. Add 3 drops of copper sulfate solution. Gently shake the test tube and observe the mixture does not change color. This indicates the absence of proteins in plain water. Now let's find out how we can test for fats in food. Fats provide energy and are necessary for our bodies. They can be found in foods such as oils, butter, milk, and meat. To test for fats, we need 3 sheets of notebook paper. Label the pages as butter, peanut, and carrot. On the butter sheet, rub a little bit of the butter against the paper. Similarly, rub a peanut and a cut piece of carrot against their pages. Allow the papers to dry. After some time, hold the papers in front of a good light source. And you'll notice oily patches left behind from the butter and the peanut. This simple test confirms that butter and peanut have fats and the carrot does not. Summary: proteins in our food help us to grow and repair our tissues. Fats are an energy food. Proteins react with alkaline copper sulfate solution and turn violet. Fats will leave behind an oily patch on a sheet of paper. Test for carbohydrates. Objective: to test for the presence of carbohydrates in a given food sample using iodine solution. Most of the food we eat contains carbohydrates. Plants produce glucose during their regular process of photosynthesis and use it as a source of energy. Excess glucose is stored in the form of starch, a carbohydrate made up of long chains of glucose molecules. Cereals such as rice, wheat, and maize, and vegetables such as potato contain carbohydrates in the form of starch. Let's do a simple test to check for the presence of carbohydrates in a potato. The principle behind this test is Starch will react with the iodine and produce a blue-black color. Begin by cutting a raw potato in half. Using a dropper, add 2 or 3 drops of a dilute iodine solution on the interior surface of each half. You'll soon notice a bluish-black color at the place where you dropped iodine. This test confirms that a potato does have carbohydrates. Now let's test for the presence of starch in wheat flour. Add a small quantity of wheat flour into a test tube and add water. Shake the solution well so that the flour completely dissolves in the water. Then, using a dropper, add 2 drops of iodine to the flour solution. The solution will turn bluish-black in color, confirming the presence of carbohydrates in wheat flour. Let's test for the presence of starch in plain water. Add 2 drops of the iodine to water. Water will not turn bluish-black, confirming the absence of carbohydrates in the water. Summary: most of our foodstuff contains carbohydrates in the form of starch. Starch reacts with iodine solution to produce a bluish-black color.
Okay, guys, and now here I will add another test for some reducing sugars in carbohydrates, like the simple sugars, maltose and lactose. This test is called Fehling test. This blue Fehling test liquid turns brick red in the presence of any sugar of these, okay? And now let's solve this activity together. So after we've learned about the 4 tests, the Burette test, the iodine test, the Fehling test, and the lipid test, I'm going to solve with you this activity. Here, the following experiments are conducted on castor beans and bean seeds. Burette test, iodine solution test, and rubbing on paper to obtain a translucent spot test. As you all know, Burette test tests protein, iodine solution test tests starch, and the rubbing on paper have a translucent spot, it tests lipids. Okay, the 3 above reactions gave positive with castor beans. The reactions 1 and 2 gave positive with bean seeds. Okay, determine the nutritive reserves contained in each of the 2 varieties of seeds. Here, the word determine, please, guys, make sure that you know it means answer plus justify. So if you want to answer this question, you have to answer and justify it. Okay, so as you can see here, the castor beans contain protein, starch, and lipids as organic and nutritive reserves because positive results was observed or were observed with the Burette test, iodine test, and spot tests. While bean seeds contain protein and starch only because they were positive just with the first 2 tests, the Burette test and iodine tests. And now, this is an assignment for you. Please, guys, read it very well, understand it very well after you watch the video, and then please send me your answers back as soon as possible. Thank you and good luck.